The crate shook so hard the metal latch rattled like loose silverware in the back of the U.S. Wildlife Service truck. Rain had just stopped over Redwood Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, leaving the earth smelling like pine needles and old storms. No one passing by could have guessed that inside that small, trembling kennel was a 4-month-old bobcat who had already survived more than most animals would in a lifetime. His name, at least the name he would soon be given, was Riley. When the officers carried the crate across the wet pavement, Riley pressed his tiny body into the farthest corner. His heartbeat thumped against the plastic walls, fast and shallow, as if fear itself lived under his ribs. He did not know this place. He did not know that he was safe. He only knew the dark garage he'd been kept in, and the hands that handled him not with love, but with profit in mind. He had been destined to be sold as an exotic pet, another victim of trafficking. Someone had already placed an inquiry, the officers said, a family seeking a wild house pet and asking if he could be declawed. The thought made even the most seasoned staff member's jaw tighten. Jake Reynolds, senior carnivore keeper, lifted the crate into an intake room where the sounds of the sanctuary faded into a respectful hush. "Easy, little man," he whispered, kneeling just close enough so Riley could smell him without fear. But Riley didn't move. His golden eyes were open wide, holding on to the last thing he understood: terror. Across the sanctuary, the African lion house lay quiet except for the slow sound of steady breathing. Inside, a lioness named Mara lay in the shadowed corner of her habitat. Her fur, the color of wheat beneath summer sun, seemed dimmer now, like someone had drawn a thin layer of ash across her coat. She had been here almost 2 years, rescued from a roadside zoo where she had been forced to have cubs repeatedly. Each cub taken too soon, each cry unanswered. Mara had stopped making a sound months ago. Those who cared for her knew the body survived, but the spirit had not followed. Visitors often paused outside her enclosure and whispered that she looked like a lion carved from stone. It wasn't that she refused food. She ate when she needed. She moved when required, but she had not played, not once. The other lions had given her space the way only animals can, without question, without judgment. It was not grief alone. It was something deeper, heavier. A life paused. While Riley was being transferred to his quarantine space, Dr. Emily Carter filled out the intake report. Malnourished, socially imprinted on humans, underweight for developmental stage, possible trauma behaviors. She had seen cases like this before, but something about him unsettled her. "She doesn't just want comfort," she said to Jake later. "He needs it." Their voices carried softly, because animals who arrive broken do not need noise. They need patience, time, and sometimes something that even medicine and rehabilitation programs cannot offer on command: connection. As Riley was being examined, he reached his small paw through the bars and touched Emily's sleeve with a trembling, searching motion. Not a swipe, a question. Emily froze for just a moment. Then he pressed his face into the fabric of her coat and stayed there. In all her years of wildlife rescue, she had never felt a gesture so quiet yet so desperate. Out beyond those clinic walls, Mara lifted her head for a rare moment. She turned her ears toward the distant hallway where intake animals sometimes cried. The sound she heard now was not crying. It was something smaller, short, unsteady, a lone, misplaced call. Something inside her flinched, like a spark striking an old match head that hadn't seen flame in years. This story, and many like it, are why the sanctuary created the Whispering Hearts Wildlife series. So stories of abandoned animals, unexpected healing, and second chances could be shared with those who care deeply about animal rescue, conservation, and the quiet ways broken hearts sometimes find each other. If you believe in ethical wildlife care, in responsible adoption, in supporting animal sanctuaries, and even planning wisely with tools like pet insurance and animal welfare charities, you can help more stories like Riley and Mara's reach the world. Consider subscribing to Whispering Hearts,
where every supporter becomes part of the mission to protect lives that cannot speak for themselves. That night, long after staff had gone home and the sanctuary lights dimmed, Riley curled into a tight ball in his temporary enclosure, his small body rising and falling with uneasy sleep. And in her distant habitat, Mara lay with her eyes open, watching the darkness as if listening again for that fragile call she could not explain. Neither knew that their paths had already begun to bend toward each other, like two wounded branches growing toward the same patch of sun. And nobody at Redwood Valley, no keeper, no vet, no officer who had carried the crate, could have imagined that the tiny bobcat who refused to stop seeking connection would soon walk, uninvited, into the territory of a lioness who had forgotten what it meant to feel. But that part of the story had not yet arrived. For now, there was only a trembling crate, a silent lioness, a sanctuary holding its breath, and a question waiting in the dark. What happens when a heart that fears everyone meets a heart that has stopped needing anyone?
Riley did not cry when dawn came. He only lifted his head, ears flicking toward each footstep in the hallway, hoping, though he didn't know for what. Jake entered quietly, careful not to startle the new arrival. He placed a dish of soft meat just inside the door, then waited. Riley stared a moment before creeping forward, each step small, cautious, unsure. When he finally reached the bowl, he didn't eat right away. Instead, he looked up at Jake, eyes wide and pleading, as if he expected a hand to pick him up like a household kitten. That look tightened something in Jake's chest. Wild animals should know the world has teeth. Riley didn't. Dr. Emily joined them soon after, carrying her tablet and a deep concern she did not try to hide. She read the latest report from law enforcement. Riley had been found in a garage, kept in a plastic dog crate between a rusted toolbox and a stack of unpaid bills. The traffickers had been planning to sell him through a private exotic pet forum, the kind of shadow marketplace where wild animals were traded as casually as used cars. One post described him as almost tame, perfect for photos, rare markings. A buyer had already asked whether his claws could be removed. Emily closed her eyes as she read it. Declawing a bobcat was not just cruel, it was a life sentence without dignity. Riley nudged her elbow gently with his nose, as if sensing the heaviness in her thoughts. She let him remain close for a few seconds, then reminded herself of the hardest truth in wildlife rehabilitation. Affection must never replace what they are. A bobcat with no fear of humans could walk up to the wrong cabin patio, the wrong child, the wrong gun. And that, Emily knew well, was how tragedies unfolded. She had testified once in a case involving illegal wildlife trade, standing beside a family who had lost their dog because someone believed a wildcat could be raised like a lap pet. The memory still followed her. Riley, however, continued seeking contact, pressing his head against the mesh when anyone approached. He chirped softly, a sound meant for a mother he no longer remembered. Jake scribbled notes. Behavior consistent with maternal deprivation, shows attachment to humans, attempts physical contact through barrier. The words felt clinical, empty compared to the truth. The little creature was lonely in a way that touched bone. Outside, the fog had settled over the sanctuary, rolling low across the lion habitat. Mara moved for the first time that morning, lifting her head and staring toward the unseen kitten's quarantine wing. She did not know what she heard, only that it stirred a long dormant ache in her body, something instinctive, something once taken from her litter by litter without mercy. Caesar, the dominant male, paced along the fence line, scanning the fog for threats, but Mara didn't look at him. She kept listening. Later that day, Dr. Emily spoke with the sanctuary director. "She's not releasable," she said, voice steady but heavy. "He lacks fear, he lacks hunting drive. A wild bobcat that doesn't fear humans won't survive." The director nodded, then asked the question she knew was coming. Ambassador program. It was the only option. Riley would spend his life here,
educating visitors about wildlife protection, illegal trafficking, and why responsible support for conservation mattered just as much as supporting trusted animal welfare charities, ethical pet insurance programs, or even planning ahead with life insurance for families who love their animals and want to protect them. Emily walked back to Riley's enclosure, sat on the floor outside the barrier, and simply talked to him. She told him that some animals were born into soft beds and others into garages with padlocked doors. She promised he would never know cages like that again. Riley crept closer, placing one small paw through the mesh, touching her with a quiet, searching innocence. And in that moment, somewhere across the sanctuary, Mara shifted, lowering her head to her paws, not in defeat, but in the first flicker of attention she had shown the world in months. Something, someone, was calling. And though neither of them knew it yet, Riley's need for connection and Mara's refusal to lift her gaze from the weight of her past would soon collide. A tiny bobcat who didn't know he was wild, and a lioness who no longer believed she was alive, were already moving toward a point that would change both of their fates.
Mara did not come from a place where lions were allowed to be lions. She was born in a roadside zoo outside Amarillo, Texas, a place that called itself a family adventure park, though families rarely knew what happened behind the tarpaulin curtains. Cubs were taken from their mothers within days, sometimes hours, to be bottle-fed by employees who had no training, only orders. Mara had delivered 6 litters in 7 years. Not one cub stayed with her long enough to learn her scent. Some were sold to traveling exhibitions, others to private collectors, and at least one was rumored to have been moved into an illegal breeding program, a detail that still made the sanctuary team go quiet when it was mentioned. She had been rescued after a complaint finally reached authorities, not from visitors, but from a former employee who could no longer stand the way lions paced in cages built too small for German shepherds. When Mara arrived at Redwood Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, she was thin, dehydrated, and eerily silent. She did not roar or snarl. She did not greet the world with the fury a lioness has every right to feel. She simply lay down in the farthest corner of her new habitat and closed her eyes, as if she had already learned that hope was a trick played on animals like her. Jake remembered those early months. He had worked with big cats for 2 decades, yet he had never seen a creature so alive in body and yet so absent in spirit. She eats, she breathes, but she's not here, he had told Dr. Emily. Visitors sometimes asked why the lioness seemed so sad. No one had a simple answer. Trauma is not a story the body tells loudly. Sometimes it is only an absence, the absence of play, curiosity, or even anger. Mara existed the way abandoned houses exist, still standing, but no longer living. That morning, as Riley continued adjusting to his quarantine enclosure, Mara rested with one ear turned toward the distant wing where the bobcat kitten sometimes made soft, questioning sounds. She did not know what she was hearing. She only knew it was small, fragile, and unfamiliar in a way that unsettled something deep inside her chest. Keeper notes later would document the moment as first observed auditory responsiveness in weeks. But notes do not explain why a lioness who had not reacted to thunder or leaf blowers or the dominant male's territorial roar should react to the cry of something she had never seen. In the days that followed, Jake tried enrichment again. Flavored scents, puzzle feeders, even a slow-moving lure intended to mimic prey. Caesar, the alpha male, batted at once and lost interest, but Mara did not approach at all. She turned her body away every time, eyes fixed on nothing, or perhaps on memories no one else could see. Some staff wondered aloud whether she had given up. Others insisted she simply needed time. But time does not heal everything. Sometimes it merely confirms that a wound has no intention of closing.
The sanctuary consulted behavioral specialists, including a wildlife veterinary expert who had testified in federal trials involving exotic animal abuse and black market breeding rings. She explained that chronic maternal disruption in captive lions can lead to neurological shutdown, a survival adaptation the brain uses when it cannot change its circumstances. She was never given the chance to be what nature asked her to be. A lioness without her cubs is not just missing something, she is missing herself. Yet something was happening now, something none of them had planned for. On the second evening after Riley arrived, Mara lifted her head again at the sound of his soft chirping calls. The noise was faint, muffled by concrete and steel, but unmistakably young. Jake noticed and paused mid-step. He watched Mara's ears shift forward. Not much, barely half an inch, but it was more movement than she had shown in days. Dr. Emily reviewed her behavior logs that night, adding new comments while the echoes of animal calls carried through the sanctuary. She thought about Riley, curled in his enclosure, trying to understand a world where humans were both safety and danger. She thought of Mara, whose world had taught her that loving anything only meant losing it. Their stories were not the same, but they were shaped by the same hands. People who treated wild animals as property, assets, transactions. Emily wished that every person who believed they could own a wild animal could sit through the depositions she had heard, the cases involving bitten children, euthanized animals, lawsuits that dragged families through years of financial loss, requiring liability insurance, animal safety compliance, and in some cases, defense by a wildlife attorney when tragedy struck. The sanctuary existed to prevent those tragedies from ever beginning. Redwood Valley was funded by grants, donors, and people who believed that protecting wildlife wasn't just charity, it was responsibility. Ethical conservation programs cost money, just as medical care, enclosure upgrades, and professional habitat design did. Emily sometimes spoke at community meetings, explaining how supporting wildlife conservation grants and verified rescue organizations helped ensure that no more cubs were taken from their mothers for profit. That night, Mara did something new. As the sky darkened, she shifted forward and sat facing the direction of the quarantine wing. She did not make a sound. She only listened, as though waiting for something she did not yet understand. And in his enclosure, Riley stood up, placing his paw against the mesh wall, releasing a small sound into the night, half chirp, half question. He did not know who might answer. He only knew that somewhere out there, another heartbeat was listening.
The fog hung low over Redwood Valley the next morning, softening the outlines of the tall pines and muffling the early sounds of the sanctuary. Riley woke before sunrise, pacing the length of his quarantine enclosure with restless little strides. He pressed his face to the mesh each time footsteps echoed in the service hallway, chirping softly as if asking for someone, anyone, to answer. Jake paused when he heard it, leaning his shoulder against the wall. "Little guy," he murmured, "you're not supposed to want people this much." But Riley only chirped louder, trying to slip his tiny paw through the mesh to catch the hem of Jake's pant leg. He didn't understand solitude. He only understood longing. Dr. Emily entered moments later with a clipboard and a tired smile. She observed Riley's pacing, taking note of the repetition, the quick breaths, the searching eyes. "Classic signs of separation distress," she said, though her voice softened at the sight of the kitten pressing his forehead against the mesh where her hand rested. She tried not to let her heart get too involved, but even seasoned professionals had limits. "You wish you had somebody," she whispered to him, "somebody who stays." Across the sanctuary, Mara lifted her head again, third morning in a row. It was nearly imperceptible, but Jake noticed as he walked past the lion habitat. Her ears angled forward, catching some distant sound carried through the cool morning air. No one else seemed to hear it, but Mara did. She turned her body slightly, facing the direction of the service corridor that connected the carnivore wing to the lion house.
Her posture wasn't alert like Caesar's territorial stance. It was more attentive, curious, quietly searching. Jake paused, watching her with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "What are you listening for, girl?" he said under his breath. Mara didn't blink. She stared through the mist as if expecting something to appear. Back in quarantine, Riley tried every corner of the enclosure, touching his paws to the stainless steel seams, testing, investigating, pacing again. The loneliness hit hardest during the early hours before keepers arrived, when the world was still and he had nothing to cling to. Emily had seen similar behavior in orphaned wildcats before. Young animals taken from their mothers too soon often carried a kind of invisible bruise, one that made them seek warmth, sound, or anything that felt like belonging. Riley wasn't just lonely, he was incomplete. Emily updated her notes. Behavior likely linked to early maternal deprivation, shows intense need for proximity. Risk for maladaptive bonding remains high. The sanctuary director reviewed the report and nodded. He'll need specialized socialization and constant monitoring. Emily agreed, though part of her suspected that no amount of human care would fill the void Riley carried. Wild animals need models, mentors, even boundaries from their own kind. Things no human could replicate without unintentionally making the issue worse. Outside the lion habitat, a group of early visitors gathered along the railing. One woman pointed toward Mara and whispered, "She looks heartbroken." Another said she reminded him of a veteran he knew, quiet, withdrawn, always facing away from crowds. Trauma takes many shapes, and Mara's was carved deep. Jake tried a new enrichment scent that morning, lavender mixed with straw, but Mara only sniffed once and turned away. Caesar batted at the burlap bag a few times, but Mara walked back to her corner, the heavy rhythm of her steps echoing softly against the stone walls. Mara wasn't scared or hostile. She was simply absent, like a lantern with the flame blown out. Later that afternoon, Emily spoke with the sanctuary's psychologist consultant during her weekly check-in. "Both animals are showing signs of trauma," she explained, "but in opposite forms. Riley needs connection desperately, Mara avoids it at all costs." The consultant nodded, comparing their patterns to cases she had seen before. "In human terms," she said, "it resembled a child with attachment wounds paired with an adult suffering complex grief. But animals don't lie," she added. "Their behaviors tell the truth clearly. Something is pulling them in the same direction, even if they don't know it yet." Emily didn't disagree. She knew from experience that animals sense each other long before humans understand why. Their communication bypasses speech. It's scent, sound, silence, instinct. Even distance cannot mute it entirely. She sometimes explained this during public talks, reminding attendees that trauma-informed care isn't just a human concept. It shapes the way sanctuaries operate, how habitats are designed, how funding is used, and why supporting ethical rescue programs matter just as much as having strong home insurance, health insurance, or pet insurance protections in place. People need safety nets. Animals do too. Near sunset, a low cry drifted from the quarantine wing. Riley's voice, soft but insistent. The sound carried through the service hall, slipping beneath doors, through air vents, across the quiet sanctuary like a thread searching for a knot. Mara heard it immediately. She rose, not all the way, but enough to shift her weight onto her front paws. Her ears twitched, her eyes narrowed, and for a moment she looked more alive than she had in months. Jake noticed her movement and watched, confused, but Mara did not look at him. She stared toward the corridor again, body tense with something the staff would later describe as recognition. Jake was there in time to see it. "Well, I'll be," he whispered. "You're listening to him, aren't you?" But Mara did not answer. She only held her pose until Riley's soft calls faded into silence again. Then she lowered her head slowly, but not with the same heavy, defeated weight as before. More like someone waiting, listening, remembering something long buried. And Riley, curled up again in the corner of his enclosure, pressed his nose into the blanket as if searching for a scent he had never known and yet somehow missed. Their worlds were still separate, but the distance between them had already begun to bend.
The morning began so still that even the wind seemed reluctant to move. A pale band of gold slipped over the mountains and reached Redwood Valley Wildlife Sanctuary just as the keepers started their rounds. Riley had barely slept. He stayed curled near the gate of his enclosure, eyes half closed, waiting for footsteps, voices, something familiar enough to quiet the restless trembling in his body. When Jake arrived with breakfast, Riley rose instantly and pressed his face to the mesh, chirping in that soft, broken way that Jake could already recognize from across the hall. "I know, buddy," Jake muttered, kneeling. "You don't want food as much as you want someone." He filled the food tray piece by piece, careful not to rush. Riley sniffed the meat, then began eating, but only after Jake stayed seated close by. When Jake stood to leave, Riley stopped eating and followed the direction of his steps, pacing, pacing, pacing. It was becoming a pattern. Dr. Emily noted it in her log later that day. Shows distress with separation, heightened vocalization when keepers leave. She knew the behavior well. She had studied it in other rescued wildcats. But Riley's distress was sharper, like he was missing memories he should have had. Warm fur, milk, a heartbeat that belonged to him. Then, as Jake was halfway down the corridor, it happened. A deep sound rolled through the sanctuary, low at first like a distant storm, but rising, rumbling, filling the air until every animal froze. It was not a threat. It was not anger. It was something older, heavier, a sound carried in the bones of the earth long before humans ever built fences. A lioness had roared. Riley's head snapped up, his pupils widened. The meat lay forgotten behind him as he ran to the far wall of his enclosure, pressing his ear to the cold steel. He chirped once, a tiny answer to a voice he did not understand, but somehow recognized. Jake stopped walking and turned back. "Well, I'll be," he whispered. "That's Mara." On the other side of the sanctuary, Mara stood facing the direction of quarantine, chest rising and falling, eyes sharp with a focus no one had seen in months. Her roar faded, but she remained still, listening as if she expected a response. Riley had already given one. He chirped again, louder this time, pacing the length of the gate. Whatever fear lived inside him had gone quiet. That voice, deep and ancient, had reached something before fear could. Emily stepped into the hall just as Riley let out another sound. It wasn't quite a chirp, it was shorter, tighter, almost like a cub calling its mother. Emily felt something land hard in her chest. She put her hand to her mouth. "He's answering her." Riley paced again, pressing his paws high on the gate, tiny claws scraping metal. For the first time since he arrived, he didn't look toward humans for comfort. He looked toward Mara. Emily checked the hallway camera feed. Mara was still watching, ears forward, tail gently twitching, not agitation, attention, recognition. Something was shifting. Jake exhaled. "I've never seen anything like it." Emily had, once, years ago during a court-ordered seizure of exotic animals in Florida. She had seen two tigers separated from a cub they weren't related to, but had formed a bond with. The cub was carried out in a transport crate, and the adults roared until the trucks were miles down the highway. Humans often believed they understood grief. They rarely understood animals. Outside the sanctuary gates, visitors were arriving. Some would walk past Mara's habitat later and whisper that she looked lonely. None of them would know that this morning she had spoken to someone for the first time in months. While reviewing Riley's behavior notes that afternoon, Emily paused. "If this continues," she said to Jake, "we may need to evaluate carefully. He's orienting to her, not just to people anymore."
Jake nodded, understanding the layers behind her concern. Relationships between rescued animals required thoughtful supervision. Anyone who had ever dealt with endangered species laws, liability concerns, or the aftermath of unregulated wildlife ownership knew that the stakes were always high. It was why donors backed the sanctuary the way families back home insurance, life insurance, or even a trusted attorney when they need protection. Everyone needs a safeguard, animals included. As the sun began to set, Riley settled near the mesh again, his small body rising and falling with tired breaths, and Mara, in her distant habitat, lay down facing the same direction. Two lives still separated by steel and distance, yet something intangible had crossed the gap. A voice had called, and another had answered.
Riley began testing the enclosure the very next morning, long before staff had finished their first coffee. He pressed his paws along the welded seams, sniffing for openings, scratching at the hinges, backing up to leap again for a higher gap. It wasn't panic this time. It was purpose, quiet, determined, and entirely new. He wasn't trying to run from something. He was trying to get to something, or someone. Emily watched from the observation window, arms crossed tight against her chest. "He's orienting to the lion house again," she said to Jake, who had stopped beside her with a frown. The keepers had moved Riley's sleeping blanket last night, farther from the corridor, hoping that distance might loosen the thread that had begun to form between him and Mara. It hadn't. Riley ignored the fresh blanket and instead dragged a toy, an old knotted towel, toward the gate, pawing at the metal bars, chirping softly. Not toward the staff hallway, toward the outside, toward the lioness he had only ever heard. "He has no idea what she is," Jake muttered. "He thinks he's calling a mother, but she's an apex predator. She could kill him with one swipe." Emily didn't disagree. A bobcat kitten slipping too close to a full-grown lioness was unthinkable, but she couldn't deny the ache inside her. The same tug she felt the first time she saw Mara lift her head for a sound that wasn't even meant for her. Two broken pieces were trying to fit together, whether the world thought they should or not. Riley attempted something new. He wedged his small body beneath the lowest bar near the gate latch, pushing, wriggling, stretching his neck to reach the outer floor. His whiskers touched air beyond the enclosure. A little more, and he could slip through. Emily reacted first. She knelt, voice low and calm. "Riley, stop. That's not your world yet. Come here, sweetheart." Riley froze, then backed up slowly and pressed his head to the mesh where her hand waited. But even as he leaned into her touch, his eyes stayed fixed on the direction of Mara's habitat. Jake exhaled. If he gets out, even for a second, he didn't finish. They all knew what it meant. This was why sanctuaries had protocols, barriers, liability procedures. It was why organizations depended on responsible funding, donated support, and sometimes legal assistance through wildlife protection laws and animal welfare attorneys. One mistake could cost lives, animal and human alike. Across the sanctuary, Mara paced. The sanctuary staff was used to Caesar pacing, marking his territory, asserting dominance. But a lioness pacing, slow, deliberate steps, tail twitching, ears forward, that was different. She stopped every few feet, listening, waiting, as if she knew someone small was trying to reach her. Visitors noticed. A father lifted his daughter to see better. "Look, she's alert today," he said with surprise. The girl leaned forward, eyes wide. "She's looking for something." She was. Staff reviewed the security cameras that afternoon. Riley had spent a full 11 minutes trying to get out, the longest recorded attempt yet. Emily placed her hand to her forehead as she stared at the footage. "If this continues, we may have to relocate him to a more secure enclosure. But I don't want to sever that connection yet, not if there's something healing in it for her." Jake didn't argue. Mara had shown more life in 1 week of hearing Riley than she had shown in the last 6 months of medical intervention, enrichment strategies, and specialized behavior therapy. Whatever the little bobcat was stirring inside her, it was real.
Toward evening, fog moved back into the valley like a living thing. Temperature dropped. The sky darkened early. Keepers began final rounds, flashlights cutting through the pale mist. Riley waited near the gate again, but this time he didn't chirp. He growled, a tiny trembling growl that sounded like a cub pretending to be brave. Emily paused. Jake turned his head. Even Caesar lifted his mane-laced neck across the sanctuary. Mara heard it, and she answered, not with a roar, but a deep chuffing sound, a mother sound, a comfort sound that no one had heard from her since the day she lost her first cub. The keepers stared at each other in disbelief. Riley's tail quivered. He paced, chirped again, tried the gate once more, paw sliding under the gap. Emily knelt beside him. "You are not going to reach her tonight," she whispered, heart tight. "But I hear you, and I think she does too." Fog pressed against the fences. Lights flickered on across the lion house. Mara lay facing the direction of quarantine once more, her breathing slow, steady, no longer hollow. Jake locked the final gate of the night and spoke so quietly only the dark heard him. "We're not just keeping a bobcat safe, we're keeping a lioness alive." Riley fell asleep eventually, curled beside the metal that separated him from the world he wanted, and Mara slept facing the same direction, as if guarding him through distance and steel. Neither understood the danger. Neither understood the rules meant to keep them apart. They only understood that something in the world had finally answered their loneliness.
The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp California sky that looked freshly washed, as though the night rain had taken every worry with it. But inside Redwood Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, tension lingered below the beautiful surface. Emily and Jake stood near the outdoor quarantine corridor, reviewing new security recommendations designed to prevent Riley from attempting yet another escape. Additional locks, reinforced gate latches, motion sensors. Each solution sounded necessary on paper, but each one came with a quiet ache they didn't want to name. "Are we helping, Riley?" Emily asked, her voice low. "Or are we about to lock away the only thing that's given Mara a reason to lift her head?" Jake rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know anymore. But we can't ignore protocol. One accident and the sanctuary would face investigation, fines, maybe lawsuits. Animal welfare laws can be strict, and donors get nervous when liability becomes part of the conversation." Liability, insurance, risk management, terms that belonged in courtrooms, not in a place meant to heal broken animals. But before they could finalize any decision, a voice called from the comms radio. "We need you both at the East Corridor now. It's urgent." Emily and Jake sprinted across the gravel path, past the eagle aviary and the shaded fox dens, until they reached the gate dividing the lion habitat from the small wildlife sector. What they saw made both of them stop short. Riley was not trying to escape. He was halfway out of his enclosure. Somehow, during morning cleaning preparations, one of the metal intake panels had been left partially unlatched. Riley had pressed his shoulder into the gap. His head and one front leg were outside the structure, tiny claws sunk into soil that wasn't yet his. He wasn't running wildly or panicking. He was looking ahead, toward the lion habitat. And Mara was already there. Separated by 2 reinforced fences and 20 feet of open ground, the lioness stood perfectly still, eyes locked on the kitten pressing through the gap. No pacing, no tension, just that steady gaze, like a promise she had been waiting to make. "Don't move fast," Jake whispered. "We spook him, he'll bolt." Emily nodded and crouched, speaking softly. "Riley, sweetheart, you're not ready. Not yet." Riley chirped once, that same fragile sound that seemed too small to ripple such a large world.
Then, in a moment that later every staff member would describe differently, the sanctuary grew impossibly quiet. A hawk paused mid-cry. The wind stilled. And Mara, heartbroken, scarred, forgotten by the world for so many years, lowered herself until her massive frame pressed against the ground. Then, she chuffed again. The sound lasted less than a second, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. Some staff swore Riley answered it. Some swore he didn't need to. Emily reached him first, gently guiding his small body back through the gap before any tragedy could unfold. Riley didn't fight her. He simply looked past her shoulder until the metal door closed again and Mara was out of view. A minute passed. Maybe two. Then Emily exhaled and said the words no one expected from the sanctuary's most rule-abiding veterinarian. Maybe we shouldn't stop this. Jake blinked. What are you saying? I'm saying our job isn't only to keep them alive, it's to help them heal. And every enrichment therapy, every behavioral treatment, every specialized medication, none of it reached her. But he has. Around them, staff members exchanged uncertain glances. There were procedures to follow, safety guidelines, operational insurance policies, and the ever-present question of funding. But none of those things felt real in that moment. What was real was this. A lioness who had not cared to live was choosing to care again. A bobcat who had never known a mother had found one through a fence. And though no one could explain it, none of them wanted to break it. By evening, the board had been notified. Emergency meetings were scheduled. Wildlife behavioral specialists were consulted. 2 legal advisors weighed in, explaining potential consequences if anything went wrong. Yet even they agreed that there might be groundbreaking research potential in studying interspecies emotional healing. A proposal began to form, slow, fragile, and daring. A controlled introduction with reinforced barriers, multiple keepers present, emergency tranquilizers ready, and veterinary monitoring. No contact at first, only closeness. Only possibility. As staff filed out for closing rounds, Emily stayed behind a moment longer, watching Riley curl into his blanket and fall asleep far from the gate for the first time in days. She whispered, "You'll meet her when it's safe, little one. Just hold on." Across the sanctuary, Mara slept facing his direction, as if she heard a promise in the air. The stage was set, not for fear, not for danger, but for one of the most extraordinary animal encounters the sanctuary had ever witnessed.
2 days later, before the sun lifted its orange rim above the tall pines, the sanctuary team gathered for what felt less like an animal management procedure and more like a moment history might pause to remember. The air carried a rare stillness, thick enough that even the owls seemed to hold their breath as Emily reviewed the final safety protocols. A reinforced divider pen had been set between the lion corridor and the small carnivore path, an enclosure within an enclosure, designed so Mara and Riley could see, smell, and even touch through a double barrier, but never fully reach one another. Jake checked the tranquilizer equipment, though everyone prayed it would remain sealed shut. "We go slow. If anything feels wrong, we stop immediately," Emily reminded the team. Her hands were steady, but her heartbeat wasn't. At the far end of the sanctuary, Mara paced, her tail swishing in a rhythm that felt different. Not anxious, but searching. The moment her amber eyes caught sight of Riley being carried in his transfer crate, she stopped. Her breath deepened. She lowered herself to the ground, front paws stretched forward, head tilted, ears forward and alert. She was ready. Riley, though young, sensed something beyond instinct. He chirped, soft,
trembling but sure, and the entire team froze at the sound. Emily set his crate inside the viewing pen and opened the door. He stepped out, slowly, one paw, then another. He was bigger now, stronger, his once dull coat returning to its natural spotted shimmer. His curiosity radiated like a small flame inside a cold cave. Without hesitation, he walked directly toward the barrier facing Mara's enclosure. Mara took a single step forward. Nobody spoke, not even in whispers. This moment belonged to them. Riley lifted his head and sniffed the air, short and quick, as if learning a new language. Mara leaned closer, pressing her nose gently to the barrier, and then, almost impossibly, she made that same soft chuffing sound. A greeting, a welcome, a promise. Riley's response stunned even the most seasoned keepers. He stretched his tiny body upward, placing one paw against the metal. Not clawing, not swatting, just touching. Emily's voice cracked. He remembers her. For several minutes, the two simply stared, exchanging breaths through steel and space. Riley rubbed his cheek against the divider. Mara mirrored the movement, careful, delicate, maternal. It was working. But then a low rumble rolled across the enclosure, one of the young male lions in the pride restless after hearing voices. Mara instantly turned, shoulders rising, a deep warning growl vibrating through her massive ribcage. Not toward Riley, not toward the humans, but toward any threat that might come near him. Even separated by steel, she guarded him. Jake whispered, "She's protecting him, just like a mother would." Somewhere in the back of everyone's mind, the practical world tried to intrude. Liability concerns, operational budgeting, legal risks, insurance obligations. Sanctuaries had procedures, protocols, documentation requirements, and in the world where everything from car insurance to health insurance required detailed compliance, the sanctuary could never ignore safety. Not even for love. But standing there, watching Mara shift her body between Riley and the distant growl of another lion, it was clear that something larger than rules was unfolding. Something no personal injury lawyer or wildlife policy attorney could fully explain on paper. Mara returned to the divider and lay down, her massive paws aligned with Riley's small ones. When he curled himself against the metal, she did the same. Two heartbeats, hundreds of pounds apart, pulsing in the same rhythm. No one dared move. After nearly half an hour, Riley grew tired and sat down. His small chest rose and fell in soft, even breaths. Mara stayed where she was, watching over him until his eyes slipped shut. Sleep came easily, something it had never done before quarantine, before fences, before Mara. Emily exhaled, finally allowing herself to blink. This isn't a fluke. This is attachment. Jake nodded. We have to rethink everything. Housing plans, enclosure design, caregiver rotation, all of it. And we'll need to present it to the board, including financial estimates, long-term care projections, maybe even new sponsorship funding. If mortgage rates and facility costs continue rising, we'll need donors, maybe grants, research partnerships. No one disagreed. They had just witnessed something that might redefine animal emotional care. As staff lifted Riley's sleeping form back into his carrier, Mara watched, eyes calm, no longer hollow. She trusted them to return him. They trusted her to wait. Walking back toward the medical wing, Emily whispered to Jake, "That was not the end of fear, but it was the beginning of hope." And the sanctuary knew, without question, that the next step would be even more daring. Controlled contact, not through a barrier, but side by side.
The morning chosen for the first controlled contact felt different from every sunrise the sanctuary had ever known. The sky began in muted pewter tones before softening into gold, as if the light itself understood the weight of what was about to happen. Animal behavior experts, veterinarians, and the sanctuary board had all reviewed the final plan. There were still concerns, of course: insurance liability, enclosure compliance standards, emergency protocols, yet no one could deny that the emotional progress was undeniable. Jake stood by the reinforced training pen, double-checking every latch, every exit route. "Once we open this gate," he murmured, "we're rewriting every chapter of Mara's life." Emily nodded, holding Riley securely in her arms, and maybe giving him the childhood he never had? The small Bobcat had grown, but he was still tiny compared to the towering Lioness who waited only 20 feet away. Mara was alert, sitting with strong posture, tail wrapped neatly around her front paws. She watched Riley with eyes that no longer looked ancient with sadness, but alive with purpose. The staff formed a protective semicircle, each of them trained for emergencies, yet silently hoping they would never need to use their tranquilizer kits. Wildlife law advisors had insisted on having a plan documented, and the sanctuary had complied. No one would be reckless, not when the world had already taken enough from these two. Emily opened Riley's carrier. The Bobcat stepped forward, slow but determined. His paws touched the earth lightly, each step a whisper across the soil. He could smell Mara: warm grass, dust, sun, and something older, richer, like a story carried across continents. A soft chuff came from Mara's chest, and Riley froze, turning his head just enough to answer with a bird-like chirp. Emily swallowed a breath. "Here we go," Jake whispered, signaling the team. 2 gates separated them: Mara's outer training gate and Riley's. First, Jake opened Riley's gate, letting him into the shared training yard. Mara watched, fully aware that the next latch would bring them closer than ever. Then slowly, methodically, Jake lifted the safety bar and unhooked Mara's gate. It opened without a sound. Mara stepped forward. Riley took 1 step to meet her. The world held its breath. Mara lowered her head until her nose touched the grass. She waited, not dominant, not looming, simply present. Riley approached her muzzle and sniffed deeply, his tiny sides lifting and falling. Then he did the unthinkable. He batted her gently on the nose with a paw so small it could have rested inside one of her eyes. Gasps broke among the staff. Mara closed her eyes, not in irritation, not in fear, but in the slow calm of trust. She leaned forward and touched her nose to Riley's forehead. It lasted only a heartbeat, but it was a lifetime in meaning. He curled against her leg, and Mara, once broken, once forgotten by a world that monetized her pain, wrapped one massive forearm around him, not trapping, not restraining, simply sheltering. It was motherhood sculpted out of wounds and persistence. Jake drew a slow breath. "We just witnessed history." Emily nodded, blinking back tears. "This isn't just animal behavior, this is healing." Riley began to knead her fur, purring, a deep, rolling sound that traveled into Mara's chest. She responded with the softest rumble, not the roar of a predator, but the hum of a protector. A distant camera clicked. National Geographic had already inquired weeks earlier, and now several wildlife journalists waited quietly behind a low barrier. The sanctuary would need publicity, not for fame, but for funding. With rising costs of veterinary care and facility maintenance, every donation helped. In a world where even life insurance, health insurance, and pet insurance were constant discussions for everyday families, sanctuaries survived on generosity and belief. And today, belief was easy. Riley yawned and collapsed against Mara, fast asleep within seconds. Mara remained still, guarding his dreams.
"What now?" Jake whispered. Emily exhaled. "Now we let them write their story. We just make sure the world doesn't interrupt it." As the team stepped away, giving the pair the space they deserved, Mara lifted her gaze to the sky. Her eyes no longer looked hollow, nor lost, nor resigned. She had found her reason, and Riley, sleeping with his cheek pressed to her fur, had found his home.
It began with a single photo. No dramatic interviews, no polished press release, just a quiet snapshot taken by a junior wildlife photographer who had been documenting sanctuary life for a college research project. The image captured Riley asleep against Mara's massive chest, her chin resting protectively over his tiny spotted back. A moment of stillness in a world that was always rushing. The student posted it online with a simple caption: "A lioness who lost her purpose, and a bobcat who never had one until they found each other." By sunrise, the photo had circled the globe. News anchors called it the most unexpected mother-son bond in the animal kingdom. Experts in animal behavior weighed in, stunned. Millions of people shared it, each adding their own reflection about loss, second chances, and the strange, unstoppable force of love. By mid-morning, Redwood Valley Wildlife Sanctuary received so many calls the phone system crashed. Emails arrived faster than they could be opened. The boardroom filled with new concerns, public safety questions, regulatory inquiries, and a sudden spike of interest from foundations and donors. One reporter asked if this event might influence animal welfare policies nationwide. Another asked whether interspecies bonding might inform future mental health therapy and trauma rehabilitation programs. A third wanted to know how the sanctuary was funded and if the public could help cover rising costs of care. "We'll need a formal media strategy," Jake said, rubbing his temples as he scrolled through tens of thousands of messages. "If this keeps going viral, we may need legal guidance, a nonprofit lawyer, maybe specialists in wildlife policy." Emily nodded. "And financial planning. We still have construction loans on the new habitats, not to mention rising food and veterinary expenses. We're not immune to inflation. We still have a mortgage on this land." Donations began pouring in anyway. Families sent handwritten letters with $5 tucked inside. A retired firefighter sent a check for $3,000, writing only, "For the lioness who remembered to love." The team gathered at a hastily arranged press conference. Emily stood behind the podium, hands steady, heart racing, cameras flashed. "Redwood Valley has always been a sanctuary for the broken," she said. "We do not breed animals, we do not sell animals, we heal animals who have been failed by humans. Mara and Riley are not a publicity story, they are a lesson. Trauma is real, connection is real, and healing is possible." One journalist asked the question everyone feared: "Is it safe to keep a bobcat with a lioness?" Emily answered carefully. "Every step is evaluated with the highest safety protocols. Our staff, our veterinarians, and independent wildlife behaviorists all monitor their interactions. But what we are observing is a maternal bond, not predatory behavior." Jake leaned toward the microphone. "We won't rush anything. We won't gamble with their lives, but we also won't deny them the only relationship that has brought them peace." Meanwhile, in the habitat, life went on untouched by headlines and flashing cameras. Mara watched Riley pounce on a feather toy one of the keepers had left. When he grew tired, he nudged her leg and she lowered her head so he could press himself beneath it. She groomed him with slow, rhythmic strokes, something no one had taught her, yet something her soul seemed to remember. For weeks she had barely eaten. Now she finished every meal. For years she had paced in circles, expression empty. Now her eyes followed Riley with alertness, curiosity, and pride. Emily spoke quietly from outside the enclosure. "She's not just surviving anymore, she's living." And Riley, once too anxious to sleep through the night,
now rested with his head on Mara's paw, safe in a world that had always been too large for him. The online world continued to buzz. Some asked whether the sanctuary offered tours. Others wanted to sponsor enrichment toys. A few asked about estate planning and whether life insurance policies could include charitable gifts to sanctuaries. Jake laughed softly. Imagine that, a bobcat and a lioness reminding people to think about what legacy means. Emily smiled. Maybe that's the point. That evening, she stood alone by the enclosure fence. Mara lifted her head, met Emily's eyes, and blinked slowly, a sign of trust. Riley slept, tucked beneath her chest. Emily whispered to the darkening sky, "You two have changed everything." And the world waited, breath held, for what would happen next.
It took less than 3 weeks for the world's fascination to evolve into something far more complex. Media crews camped outside Redwood Valley's entrance. Satellite vans lined the narrow rural road. The sanctuary's website crashed twice in a single afternoon from an overwhelming surge in traffic. Donations climbed, yes, but so did scrutiny, legal, regulatory, and public. The first letter came from a national wildlife regulatory agency, formally requesting a comprehensive review of the sanctuary's interspecies contact protocols. A second letter followed from an international conservation organization, demanding additional documentation. There were even inquiries from animal rights attorneys suggesting that, although the bond between Mara and Riley was extraordinary, it might also set a dangerous precedent if anything ever went wrong. Emily read each message slowly, her chest tightening. Riley was asleep on a heated blanket across the room, unaware of how close the world was to deciding his fate. Jake stood near the filing cabinet, rubbing his forehead. "They're worried about liability," he said. "They're worried about who gets blamed if..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. If Mara forgot her gentle restraint, if instinct overpowered trust, if one tragic moment destroyed everything. Emily closed the folder. They're afraid of the risk, but they don't see what happens when we choose safety over healing. Meanwhile, public pressure began to fracture into opposing groups. Some supporters created petitions to protect the bond between Mara and Riley, urging lawmakers to consider emotional welfare in captive animal policies. Others argued for strict separation, citing ecosystem ethics and the importance of species-specific care. A major news network aired a roundtable discussion titled Lioness and Bobcat, Miracle or Mismanagement. One expert called it a breakthrough in trauma rehabilitation. Another called it irresponsible and dangerous. A third suggested that high-profile cases like this could influence everything from healthcare policy and animal rehabilitation to future funding models for sanctuaries, similar to how public interest shapes life insurance and estate planning decisions. All of it felt unreal. So many voices, and yet none of them belonged to the animals at the center of it all. That evening, Emily and Jake walked together to the lion meadow. Mara lay beneath a sycamore tree, Riley curled against her ribs. The lioness lifted her gaze as the pair approached, not with worry, not with aggression, but with that quiet, ancient understanding that had first captured the world's heart. "We might be forced to separate them," Jake said, barely audible. Emily's voice broke. "She'll go back to the way she was, and Riley will never understand why the only love he's known disappeared." The sanctuary board scheduled an emergency meeting for the following Monday. On the agenda, whether Riley should remain with Mara, legal implications of continued contact, insurance and liability concerns, donor influence and public expectations, and potential relocation to another facility. Relocation. The word soured in Emily's throat. But the worst blow arrived the next morning, hand-delivered in a crisp envelope. A legal petition from an out-of-state wildlife facility requesting custody of Riley. They argued that a bobcat belonged with bobcats, that emotional narratives should not override biological truth, and that Redwood Valley was allowing viral fame to cloud professional judgment. Jake paced in the office in frustration. They don't know him. They didn't see him starve for comfort. They didn't see her learn to breathe again. Emily looked out toward the meadow, voice steady but shattered at the edges.
We have one weekend to prove to the world that love can be a legitimate form of treatment, not an accident that needs correcting. Outside, the wind picked up, tossing dried leaves across the ground like scattered pages of a story not yet finished. Mara sensed the shift. She drew Riley closer, wrapping her tail around his small body. It wasn't language, it wasn't logic, it was instinct. One older than laws, older than fences, older than fear. As Emily watched them, she whispered to the dusk, "I won't let them take you from each other. Not without a fight." The world might demand separation, regulations might insist upon it, but Redwood Valley was preparing for the most important argument in its history, an argument for a mother's right to heal, even if she wasn't born to the child she loved.
The boardroom felt colder than any winter Redwood Valley Wildlife Sanctuary had ever known. Outside, the Lion Meadow glowed under a gentle morning sun, but inside, tension wrapped itself around every chair, every folder, every held breath. On the large screen, a legal representative concluded her briefing, her voice clinical and unwavering. If Redwood Valley proceeds with this interspecies cohabitation, it must accept full liability for any incident. That includes medical costs, potential lawsuits, and the possibility of public trust erosion. I strongly advise separation until further scientific evaluation is complete. Silence. Emily's hands tightened at her sides. Jake stared at the tabletop, jaw rigid. Half the board members avoided eye contact, torn between heart and law. Then, the sanctuary director cleared his throat. "We have one more statement before we vote. Dr. Monroe, please continue." Emily rose. Her voice trembled only once. "We didn't ask for this story. Riley didn't. Mara didn't. Pain brought them here. Pain humans created. And when they found each other, something happened that none of our treatment plans, enrichment programs, or medical protocols could achieve." She tapped a folder. Photographs slid into view. Mara before Riley. Distant eyes, ribs too defined, pacing circles in the same worn patch of grass. Then photos after Riley. Her coat brighter, eyes alert, posture proud, a lioness rediscovering herself. We can talk about liability, legal frameworks, and risk assessments, but I ask you to consider another kind of investment: emotional welfare, healing, quality of life. We use those terms in human care all the time. Mental health, therapy, support systems. We protect families because love matters. She pointed toward the meadow beyond the glass. Why is their family less worthy just because it doesn't fit the definition we wrote? A long pause. Then the door burst open. Everyone turned. It was Carlos, one of the junior keepers, breathless. You need to see this, now." The entire board followed him at a near run through the corridor, past the aviaries and shaded dens, until they reached Mara's enclosure. The staff stood gathered in stunned silence. And there, under the wide branches of the sycamore tree, Mara lay on her side, breathing steadily, while Riley kneaded gently at her chest, purring so deep it vibrated through the ground. But that wasn't what held everyone's stare. Mara had moved sticks, leaves, and tufts of straw into a circular shape. A nest. Jake's breath caught. She's preparing a den for him. One of the wildlife behaviorists stepped closer, voice shaky. "This is advanced maternal nesting behavior. She isn't just protecting him, she's planning for him." Emily whispered, tears gathering in her lashes. "She thinks he's hers." Mara lifted her head, blinking slowly at the crowd. She did not rise. She did not growl. She simply placed a paw more firmly across Riley's small, spotted back and chuffed, soft, confident, unafraid. And the board understood. No debate, no policy language, just truth.
The sanctuary director exhaled. It would cause more trauma to separate them now. We move forward with the unified habitat design. We support the research program. Riley stays. Relief washed through the staff like warm rain. Emily knelt at the fence. You're safe, little one. You both are. That night, a new statement went out to the world. Redwood Valley Wildlife Sanctuary will honor the interspecies bond between Lioness Mara and Bobcat Riley. Their partnership will guide new standards for trauma-informed animal care. Donations surged again, not from spectacle seekers, but from people who understood what it meant to fight for something fragile and true. Financial advisors reached out, discussing charitable trusts, estate planning, and wildlife conservation funding. Families sent cards, children mailed drawings. Veterans wrote about PTSD service dogs. Therapists sent letters saying Mara and Riley were teaching compassion better than textbooks ever could. Weeks passed. The habitat expansion began. Warm caverns for winter shelter, platforms for views of distant hills, shaded dens where a lioness and a bobcat could sleep without the world interrupting them. And sometimes, when visitors stood quietly enough, they saw a sight they would carry for the rest of their lives. A lioness grooming a bobcat's ears. A bobcat sleeping within the arc of a giant paw. Two broken stories reforged into one. No roar, no sound, just love. When the sanctuary posted its official update video, it ended with a line the world would repeat for months. Healing doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it has stripes and spots, and it purrs under a lioness's heart. And in the distance, under a sky turning lavender with evening, Mara watched Riley chase a drifting leaf through the grass. No longer a prisoner of her past, but a guardian of a future neither of them could have imagined. Because the tiny bobcat refused to stop bothering the sad lioness. And her reaction didn't just melt hearts, it changed them.